Welcome to the Flight Club Podcast, a woman's guide to leaning out. We give you a behind-the-scenes look at business launch and growth through the stories of successful female entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Felina Hansen, founder and CEO of Hera Hub.
Hello and welcome. I'm excited to be speaking today with Sable Lomax. She is a global diversity, inclusion, and equity expert. Currently, she is the global director of programs for Fearless Futures, who facilitates equity and inclusion learning experiences across sectors in service of designing equitable ecosystems for people and products. Welcome to the show today, Sable.
Hello. How are you? And thanks for having me.
I am doing awesome. I'm so excited to dive in to your background, learn where you're from, talk a bit about some of your educational choices and your startups. You have co-founded a company, you founded another company, and now you're doing this amazing work with Fearless Futures, which we'll get to, all the great things you're doing there. But first, take us back. Give us a little background on who you are.
Oh, taking us back. Well, I always start with I'm a Black girl born in Brooklyn. And I started saying that a few years ago when I realized how many people in the city were actually transplants. But outside of that, I'm not an army brat, but I did live in Memphis and Chicago, so my accent sometimes confuses people. But as far as education and such, I received my bachelor's degree from Temple University, my master's in education from Penn, and one thing that I'm really, now that I'm a bit older, I'm really appreciative of is that my mother encouraged me to study something I was interested in versus focusing on a career field solely based on how much money you might make ultimately. And I think because of that encouragement is how I've ended up where I am today.
What was your mother's career?
So my mother has been in marketing, and it's interesting when she tells her story. It's kind of like she happened to end up in marketing. It wasn't something that she sought out to do. It wasn't something she was, passionate about. It was something that she was good at. So I think because of her experience with that, when it was my turn to go to school, she said, listen, a bachelor's degree is the equivalent of a high school diploma these days. You're going to, depending on what you want to do, you're going to have to get a master's degree anyway, or some type of certification. So, with this bachelor's degree, just study something that would excite you to go to class, study, get good grades, and so forth. So that's kind of that was her way of saying, I'm not going to force you to become a doctor or a lawyer or engineer. I want you to do something that you are passionate about in some capacity.
Awesome. And it looks like you stuck around the Philadelphia area for a bit. Is that right?
Yeah. Oh my God. I started, as you can imagine, with a teenager from New York City. You have the trains, you have the buses, you have cabs. You can get anywhere you want to. There's no need for a license. And I say all that to say I ended up in Philadelphia, and I was very confused as to why things stopped running at midnight. So my first years in Philly, it was truly a love-hate relationship because my level of independence was gone. For those who don't know or can't imagine or just haven't visited New York City yet, you're completely, children get to be freer a little bit earlier because you don't need a license to get around. So obviously there's different rules and such and with boundaries and parents, but I got to go where I wanted to go and I got to get there on my own. And then Philly kind of stole that level of independence from me. However, once I graduated, I was like, okay, you're sticking around a little bit longer, girl, you've got to get your license. And that's when I began to fall in love with Philly because I can get around again.
Awesome. So you started off as an English teacher and case manager. What is that context in the school system? What is a case manager?
So for those who don't know, someone who is a case manager, that's usually an indication that they have a special education certification. So what level of special education or what audience in particular, population might vary. So it might be those with cognitive learning disabilities. It might be those who have autism. It might be hearing impairment, speech. There's so many different what's the word I'm looking for, categories within special education, but there's usually an indicator that they have that certification and they deal with that population as well. I both worked with what is considered general education and special education.
Got it. So, it looks like you spent some time in that industry. Talk about maybe some of the things that you learned along the way, and what then caused you to say, I'm going to go do my own thing. I'm going to start my own thing here. What prompted that?
It was so many different factors. I think one thing that I noticed now that I was a teacher, because oftentimes I think when education, pre-K to 12th grade education is being discussed, it's being discussed through the lens of a parent, or it's being discussed through the lens of a child. So even if it's an adult remembering when, it's not necessarily discussed through the perspective of a teacher. And then in particular, the teacher on record. So those who are responsible for inputting grades, etc. So I say all that to say, as someone who's attended both public schools and private schools, as someone who's attended schools across a few different cities, it was very, very interesting for me to see as an adult, through adult eyes, how things are different. And then the ways in which that impacts students, who has access to what, who has opportunities to what, and then the ways in which that colors someone's adulthood. So it's one thing to read about it, it's one thing to study it, it's another thing to be there and go, wow, the level of bureaucracy is quite high and thick, the red tape, etc. And what are the ways in which you can empower students, understanding that oftentimes your future can very much so be indicated by your zip code. So that experience there, and I had success within the classroom, but that experience there is what led to the first adventure, as what are the way that we can use external methods of praise and gratification to then build those internal mechanisms, because not everyone wants to do good, or, and I'm putting good in quotations here, just for the sake of doing good. Sometimes you need a little bit of motivation until it transfers, if it ever transfers.
Interesting. Okay, so this is, you co-founded My Study Rewards, is that?
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Okay. Yeah, so talk about that a bit more. I couldn't agree more. I mean, there's I could talk all day about the education system, and I'm completely not even equipped to do so, but I'm so passionate about it. I taught at the college level for 8 years, so I kind of feel like I got to see the outcome of K through 12 to some extent. So that's my only credentials to talk about it. But yeah, I'm super interested in this. So talk about My Study Rewards. What was it?
Well, I got convinced to do that. I was never someone that started off saying, I want to own this and I want to do that. Like, that was just it's not my personality naturally. But with the good pitch deck, I can get convinced if you answer enough of my questions easily. But in short, the idea of that was to use technology, since, I think I'm the last generation that also played outside, but then maybe depending on your household, elementary school or high school, there was a computer in the house. Anyway, it was the idea where, how can we use technology, the use of playing games with rewarding kids with, gift cards, essentially financial rewarding that's connected to their grades. So if you do this, if you do this assignment, if you play this educational game, if you get this score, whatever game or, assignment you may be participating in, then it's like you have this bank. So I think of modern day apps I think it starts with a D. I'm losing the name right now. Oh, Dosh, the Dosh app. It's like if you spend a certain amount of money using this app, then you get cashback rewards. So it was a similar idea. If you, get a certain grade, if you do a certain amount of assignments, if you show that you're actively studying, you're going to get these cash rewards. I think the most when I think about all that I learned from that experience is one, praise to all the folks who are building apps, because we actually had to build an app and pilot an app.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was fun. And so that was definitely a learning experience. But two, realizing the level of connectedness and all of the pieces that had to come together for that to, be successful in the end. I think that's the area that was underestimated. So it was a great learning lesson.
Interesting. And who was your co-founder?
Dominique Wilkins. We actually went to Temple together.
Okay, awesome. And did she have a technical background?
Oh, he's named after the basketball.
Sorry.
No, it happens to him all the time. He's named after the NBA player. He did not have a technical background, but his specialty was in sales. So together we actually ended up hiring someone who had a tech background, and then they were the ones that was responsible for actually building the app. Because if that were up to me, that certainly would have never happened.
Yeah. It's a lot. I talk to a lot of folks that are like, I'm going to build an app. I'm like, okay, great, go for it. But like, I don't think people realize, the process and the approval and then the updates and you don't just build an app and walk away from it. It's
no, not exactly.
Oh my goodness. So it looks like from there, Sable, you launched Real Brown Girls and at the same time, continued to do work in literacy. But I want to make sure we get to, the founding of and what prompted that, sorry. Where along this path, I mean, I'm starting to see, where you see inequality in the school system, where along the path did you really say, I want to put my stake in the ground and be an expert in diversity, equality, and inclusion?
Those are really good questions, and I hope I remember them all.
I know, sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Talk about
Question one, question two. Yeah.
The inception of Real Brown Girls.
Similarly to my study rewards with Real Brown Girls, it's not something that I set out to do. However, I can't tell a story that someone convinced me. This was definitely my doing. It was birthed during a time where I kept hearing stories of Black women and young Black women in their early 20s who were committing suicide. And I didn't know any of these Black women personally, but within, I want to say like a 3-month range, I heard several stories. And if you looked at their Instagrams or their Twitters or what have you, on paper, they had gone to school, they were in good, they had good jobs. So they, early entry, but, that's where you start and then you grow. And it bothered me and I couldn't really pinpoint why. So to be very frank with you all, Real Brown Girl started as a profile on Instagram that just had all these like pretty little pictures. And I had to ask a friend, because I wasn't on Instagram at the time, how does this work? And she was like, you were the oldest millennial that I know. And I said, it's fine. Just show me how it works. Fast forward, I had to have a reckoning with myself, because I'm just not the stereotypical girly girl. And the conversation on Instagram began to shift to a career focus. And because of my background in education, because of my background in Black studies, I was able to use that knowledge and experience to be able to say, well, how is your career different, and how do you have to handle things differently due to the reality of racism and sexism? how might you not have a network built in, simply because your parents, attended college and were able to be successful? Who might have to work harder for that due to the inequities that have been baked into the fabric of US society? So, like that, I was able to use my background and experience to really color Real Brown Girls in that way, and really, just focus on career and network. But because of those three women that really were, I just felt them in my spirit to say, in the midst of all of this, who are you, and are you taking care of yourself outside of, accomplishments and certifications and terminal degrees, etc.? Is your heart and spirit okay? Because the reality is, to have a life, to navigate life dealing with, racism or classism or, sexism and, all the other isms that exist, it weighs on you. So, really holding life and career in the same hand and recognizing both of those have to be important. So that's kind of how Real Brown Girls has shaped and morphed over time.
Awesome. And what is the Instagram handle? Is it Real Brown Girls?
Yeah, at
As
Real
well?
Brown
Okay,
Girls.
perfect. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Oh, we'll be sure to follow you there. And thank you for the important work you're doing there, as well as I want to get to the work you're doing with Fearless Futures. What is Fearless Futures first?
So, Fearless Futures is a company headquartered in London with an office in New York City that is committed to getting to the root causes of systemic inequities and really providing people with the necessary tools, skills, and frameworks in order to design for inclusion at scale, be it at the people level or be it the products that companies produce. And this work happens globally. So, that's basically Fearless Futures in a nutshell.
Awesome. And how did you get involved with the company?
It was interesting. So, if for those who are listening, you might be able to gauge at this juncture that I've been teetering back and forth between full-time entrepreneurship and not, or holding two hats.
Yeah.
So there was a point where I was working at a nonprofit and I was, exploring jobs and such. And because Real Brown Girls was doing fine, but I just wanted it to be more purpose and mission driven. I was like, for me, it's easier to do that if I'm not focused on, revenue, quarter sales, etc. So that's why I ended up going back into a full-time position, but Real Brown Girls never went away. And while I was there, because of the population that particular nonprofit focused on, something inside of me kept going, okay, there's more. And not necessarily more for people, but there's more for me to do, and there's a greater impact that can be had. And with that impact, Real Brown Girls wasn't the appropriate audience because we focus on Black women. So with that, I literally just began to explore what opportunities were available. Very light touch. I was happy where I was. I could do both my job, my full-time job. I could do Real Brown Girls. Real Brown Girls was having success. And I came across Fearless Futures, and it just felt like the position was created for me. And then I applied. Obviously, I got it. And it's just fit so nicely with the desire, the innate desire in me to do more and to do better. So I say better in the sense that with Real Brown Girls, I'm able to directly connect with Black women as it relates to life and career. And on the Fearless Future side, I'm able to have these very rich and in-depth conversations to really highlight the level of critical analysis and thought that's required for inclusion and equity to exist with the same people that those in Real Brown Girls are working with, are working for, or are working for them. So to me, it's like a lovely full circle process is happening right now.
Awesome. And who are your clients with Fearless Futures?
Oh, that's a really good question. So It varies. Right now, if I broke down a handy dandy pie chart, it would largely be tech. And then it would be investment banks, some other startups, and then charities and some government organizations. But the bulk is tech. But I know tech is such a broad sector. It's like, what does that really mean? The categories within tech vary. And of course, everything's under NDA, but, largely I would say 65 to 70% tech.
Got it. Awesome. Well, I'm excited for the work that you're doing there, and wanna, where do you go from here? With Fearless Futures, I know you're doing great work there, but I wanna, what does it look like? What's the rest of 2021 look like, especially for Real Brown Girls?
Oh, the rest of 2021 looks like hopefully a vacation with some sand. I feel like I've been in this house for a really long time. So that's high on the to-do list for sure.
Out.
Yes, like even if it's just to the Jersey Shore, like I want to get out. So that's very, very high on the to-do list. It's probably priority one. Priority, we won't rank the rest of them, but with respect to Real Brown Girls, in the process of actually behind the scenes doing a full rebrand, so the logo, the website, all that fun stuff that it's not fun to do, but it looks fun in the end.
I think it's fun. I love that stuff.
Then I should have talked to you before I started this, because sometimes I'm like, oh, another revision. But so yeah, working through all that good stuff, and then in the process of really planning out a marketing campaign to relaunch for a multi-industry national network, so that we have like National Teachers Association, and there's associations for social workers and engineers and all that good stuff. I've yet to see a multi-industry network made of professional women. And knowing that folks aren't working at the same company till retirement anymore, much less living in the same city, how powerful would it be if you could plug in no matter where you were and know there was a community of women supporting you? So that's on the Real Brown Girl side. And then on the Fearless Future side, honestly, we're planning to have a retreat because we haven't seen each other in so long. The business is going really, really well. So continuing to grow the US business, because that's something that I was hired to do. I've been doing well so far. So just want to keep that up, and really just get to hug a coworker. It might sound small, but I really just want to hug somebody that's not in my household.
That's fantastic. Well, if our listeners, Sable, want to get in touch with you, want to follow you, we know at Real Brown Girls on Instagram, but where else would you like folks to follow up with you?
I can be found on LinkedIn, Sable Lomax. If you are an Instagram user and you don't want to follow Real Brown Girls, you can always follow me. It's Miss Sable B, and that's MS, not MISS. And you can always find me on the website. So there's www.realbrowngirls.com. If you happen to want to engage in any kind of inclusion and equity training, you can find me at www.fearlessfutures.org.
Perfect. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time, Sable.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Flight Club, sponsored by Hera Hub. We look forward to sharing more success stories with you soon.